So before I start, I want you to think about these questions as I talk. So what do you struggle with? And what do you want to do in the world? So keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that. So who am I? That's me. I'm not that guy. I'm that one. I'm also this guy. I'm not world famous, but Mr. Kim plucked me out of obscurity about 5 years ago, and here I am for a second time. I talked 2 years ago at the Green Summit, and the subject of my talk was believe you can do impossible things, and I think that this is probably an extension of that in a way. So what do? I work for a building materials company that makes disaster-resilient buildings materials. And the reason why I work there is because climate change is here, and we're not going to stop it. So we need to do a strategy that both mitigates climate change and makes people more safe in their houses and buildings, while also working towards rolling it back. But I'm not here to talk about that. So when I was little, I could draw, and it was all I wanted to do. It was all I could get myself to do, and so I spent my life, early life, just thinking about composition, and I was drawing even before I had any memories, and I was unusually good at it, and so this sort of became like my driving force. My parents couldn't get me to focus on anything else, and so they weren't like, you're going to go to school to be a doctor or something. They said, you're probably going to go to school to be an artist, and there's no way we can change that. And so they supported me in that. And so what that means is that illustrators, it's hard to make money as an illustrator now because with all these AI picture making stuff, like, people just use that now, so there's no money in that. So I'm a designer, not that kind of designer. So Bill Moggridge is a hero of mine. He was one of the founders of a company called IDEO, which expanded the idea of what design could be. And so I'm going to read this quote because I think it's important to understand what I think of design as being. So it doesn't occur to most people that everything is designed, that every building and everything they touch in the world is designed. Your books are designed, your clothes are designed, this talk was designed. When you get up in the morning, you have a schedule, you design that schedule. Buildings are designed, everything is designed. And it can be designed well, and you have to, if you recognize that you're designing things, then you can design them well, and oftentimes things aren't designed well because people don't realize that there's nothing that's not designed. And so, I just use design as a process for thinking about things, and I practice a design philosophy called human-centered design, which means that I start with the people I'm designing for, I learn from them, and effectively we design things together so that when I make something, I'm not just giving something to somebody that I think is beautiful or whatever, I'm giving them something that they really need. And the world has a lot of stuff that nobody needs. Okay, so more personally, I have a design foundation that I live by called information in space. So what does that mean? What's space? Space is potential. Space is a canvas. Space is a problem to be solved or a challenge. And it's just waiting for information. And that information can take many forms. This is how you organize the information in that space. That's what design is for me, and so everything is design. I also learn everything through experience. So for me, I can't read manuals, I can't watch videos to learn how to do stuff. I just don't process that information. What I do is I just tinker with things, and then I figure out how to use them, which means I often figure out how to use them wrong, but that doesn't matter because I figured out how to use them my own way. And so I think it's important to sort of understand that because that is central to everything I'm going to talk about. So this is a Montessori classroom. Who here is familiar with Montessori, the Montessori method, and Montessori schools? So Montessori school is kind of like letting the inmates run the asylum. It emphasizes self-directed, child-led learning, hands-on activities, and collaborative play. So basically, what the teachers are there for, they're not there to teach so much. I got to be careful about this. My mom's a Montessori teacher, and if I get it wrong, she's going to be mad. So they're there to guide kids. Kids just walk around a classroom. They find things that they think are interesting, and when a kid sits down at something they want to play with, that's when the teacher knows that that kid is open to that thing. And then they'll come help them understand it. Montessori school is probably a blessing that saved my life, and I'll get into that a bit later. And I often bring this kind of environment into my work with clients. I make them play with things. I make them collaborate on stuff and do games and things like that that are unlike what they think they're going to do because as we get older, our idea of what's possible narrows and narrows and narrows until it's very rigid and there's very little time for play or anything. And play reconnects adults with childhood, and that's when everything was possible. And I just never left. It's still where I live. So, speaking of experience, and learning through experience, I want to talk about some of these experiences today. So I go down wild and often unforeseen project black holes that produce formidable bodies of work and almost on autopilot, and sometimes don't even know that I'm there until I've been there for a while. I think of these as projects, though they cover an extraordinary breadth of focus. So sometimes it takes some time to even figure out what they are, or to even realize for me that they're projects. And sometimes I don't realize that I've spent 5 years on a project until the project is over. So some are going to feel relevant to the work you want to do, perhaps, and some may not. I think there's such richness in a wide range of interests, and we shouldn't confine ourselves to only focusing on one thing. All experience lifts each other experience, and the happy overlapping is how we grow in wondrous ways and do incredible and unexpected things. So to kick my talk off, let's talk about some of my project rabbit holes, and I'll share what I got out of them. So first is the Public Society was a company that I started in 2011 to just do good work in the world. And we didn't take work from companies that we didn't feel were trying to do something to make the world better. And surprisingly, you can make a living at that. So that Public Society was like this band of crazy people here that we were in New York Times having a beach party to raise awareness about a climate change march that was happening the following weekend. And so I'm going to talk about we're just going to do a couple of projects. We did hundreds of projects, but if I went through them all, we'll be here till next week. So first one. So there was a climate march in 2014 that was, at the time, it was set to coincide with the UN General Assembly, I believe. And at the time, it was the largest climate march in history. And what my company did was we worked with all the groups that were running the march to get people out to the march, so we did a whole lot of advertising work. We took over the New York City subway system. At one point during this campaign, we fully had 25% of the entire New York City subway system was our ads. And that was all to do this. I brought out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And it was nobody had seen it before or anything like this, and this was all over the world. This was just the New York one. So there were literally millions and millions of people. And I want to say that we had an impact, but I feel like things are still getting worse. So, when somebody loses some, you got to fight the fight, and sometimes it's a long battle. Here's another one. So this is long-line fishing. So long-line fishing is a fishing method used by commercial fisheries or commercial fish companies that is horribly detrimental to the ocean. It's horribly detrimental to the animals in the ocean. It kills more than fish. It's also responsible for decimating fish stocks. And so we did a project with Greenpeace to try to raise awareness about this with a new audience, right? So we made a video game to get to the people who just want to play video games. And so we made a game called Shark vs. Mermaid Death Squad and made these cute characters. And it was Greenpeace versus the Tuna Pirates. And we modeled it after Pac-Man, which is a game everybody knows, and all the levels were the supermarkets that stocked these fish. And we kept track of how good or bad those supermarkets were doing. We would change the levels based on their rank. And so, and there was just an example of what we did. We didn't really adhere to what people think a design studio does. We would just think outside the box all the time and figure out how do we do things that are just interesting and weird and new. And you can still play it. So if you want to play the game, it's there. And I hope it's still there, actually. I haven't checked it today. So if somebody tries that address and it's not there, then let me know, because I got to update the URL or something. Last one I want to talk about is a project with the UN Environment called Clean Seas. It was a large project that UN Environment was running to target countries and companies to force them to rethink the way they use plastic, reduce the plastic in their materials. And we used public engagement and experiences and exhibitions to raise awareness about this. So the thing that the anchor for this whole thing was a traveling exhibit based around a VR experience that people could go and they could just wander around in the ocean and get a perspective on being in the ocean with sea life that they wouldn't ever get. So we wanted to immerse them in the experience of it. We also wanted to educate people, so we also had a lot of educational materials, and we would sort of use sort of infographic-like methods for getting people to understand how much plastic winds up in the ocean. And we signed people up so that we could activate them to reach out to governments and to companies to try and force them to be a little more responsible. We also set up at a lot of UN conferences so that we could basically steal environmental ministers and get them to sign for their countries that they were going to do something about this. And I had the person who was running the operation that this was for was very good at basically just cornering people and getting them here to do this, and then he would harass them afterwards to make sure that they actually did something. All of this was housed in a geodesic dome that was designed. So this is in a different place. So this is at the UN headquarters in New York City. This is at UN Environment in Nairobi. And this is in New Delhi, India. So it was designed to travel around, and we had to make it compact. So we basically designed it so you could break this whole thing down, put it into a few Pelican cases, put it on a plane, and ship it to the next place. And this thing went all over the world. So at the end of each of these things, I want to talk a little bit about what I learned from the experience of this thing. So I learned it's possible to focus on doing things that matter without compromising your values. I learned also, and my wife knows this very well, Burnout is an ever-present danger, and you should think about that when you do work that's hard and you really go all in on it. You can also unintentionally wind up in a situation where you can't do anything because you're overloaded and you just burn out. Maybe you go and live on a beach for the rest of your life or something. And you don't want that. The best work happens when you let your ego go. So I was the person who ran the company, but I had so many incredible designers, and it was often so much better for me to step out of the way and let them show me the work that they could do, because it always blew me away. And I think the best work that happened there wasn't by me, it was by my staff. And if you run a place, I want to say there's nothing more rewarding than seeing your team leave and succeed on their own. So many of the people who left went on to do the things that they wanted to do and have really kind of created bodies of work on their own. And when I hired them, a lot of them were just out of college. And so it's been something over the last 15 years to see them grow and to do their own things. And also, do things people tell you you can't. A lot of people will tell you, you have to do this thing or that thing. Your title means this, and so you have to do the thing your title says. And what you should do is say, forget about it. I'm going to learn to do things that are beyond what my title allows for. So that's one. So totally different. I spent 5 years as a political cartoonist. And so the story behind that is I got fired from a job. And this is around the time of the Iraq War, and I was unfortunately pretty politically stupid, and I didn't know a lot of things. I just knew that it felt wrong, and I wanted to learn about these things. But like I said, I don't learn by reading. I don't necessarily. I need to read the news, of course, but I learn by doing something. And so I decided to become an editorial cartoonist, political cartoonist, and so I did cartoons for 5 years, and just about all kinds of things. And I learned how to quickly have a personal perspective on things and how to turn that perspective into something that people could understand in a couple of seconds. So that was about using corn for biofuels instead of feeding people. This is about the ever-sinking media industry. This was about how governments fall down so often on climate change, and people are forced to carry it across the finish line. For a while, and it was like 2 weeks or something like that in the United States, where the US media was basically so obsessed with pirates that I drew a cartoon about pirates hijacking the ship of US media. I did portraits of presidential candidates. And this is, in 2008, there was a peaceful revolution in Iran, and Iran apparently didn't really know that Twitter existed, and so Twitter was kind of a thing that people used to really shellac the regime, which unfortunately they can't do anymore. I forgot to mention, Rufus is me, it's not some other person. It was a pen name that I came up with for cartoons. And then, 2008 again was financial collapse in the United States. So you had all these stores closing and no one there to help them. And then finally, Wall Street, which was just crapping all over everybody. And like I said, a cartoon is worth 1,000 words, and a lot of cartoonists wind up in prison because they're very effective, and authoritarian regimes don't like them. So what did I learn? I learned to have conviction in your beliefs. Don't be afraid to voice them and stand by them. Beyond necessity, I made no money doing this whatsoever. I was employed by a paper, but they paid me $25 a week, so not even money to eat. Beyond necessity, money shouldn't be your motivation. Just do what you love and you'll be okay. I'm here, and I'm still doing stuff, and so, I always just do what I want. And so, if you get into a position where you're basically thinking about how much money you're going to make, maybe you should think about doing something else. Put your talents to work for something you believe in. For me, it was cartoons in this case, but everybody has talents. So use them for something that matters to you. Learning takes unexpected forms. I learned all about politics by drawing cartoons. So here's another one, totally different. Sometimes the things we do are, who knows where they come from. So I went to a music store when I was 19 years old with a friend of mine, and he was buying a microphone or something, and there was a bass guitar there. And I'd never played music. I didn't care about music before that. I bought that bass guitar, and that led to a 15-year music career. After the bass guitar, I learned to play bass. My friend and I found a music studio in his dad's garage, and he had all these old synthesizers, and so we just played with those. And then that became learning how to sequence music. Sequencing music is basically, if you've ever used a sequencer, it's pictures. So drawing pictures to make music, which is kind of an overlap of my interests. I got signed to a record label, and I toured all over the world. And I didn't ever intend to do this. It just kind of happened. And I've scored movies. and so it was just an amazing experience. And music is this way that you can communicate with people without ever talking to them, people you don't even know. And so that was what I did for a while, and I'm waiting for this thing to get to somewhere so it starts playing something. But yeah, but I don't really know how to describe this, and again, it's a rabbit hole, and I don't know how I got there, but I followed it, and it was an amazing experience. And I'm just going to stand here because I don't have anything else to say. By the way, I wrote this. This isn't somebody else's music. And then it was over. After 10 years, I realized I had nothing left to write, and I just stopped writing music. And over 7 years, I wrote 5 records. And this was 20 years ago. I stopped writing music about 20 years ago, and over years, I've gotten people who found me and asked me, if I was the person who wrote that stuff, and that they've been looking for something for forever, because it's not, I didn't really do it to I didn't make money off this either. I do a lot of things that don't make any money. And they would call me, or they would email me and ask if I was this person, and they would ask where they could get a record. And what I would do is I would just give them my entire catalog, and just say, what don't you have, because I can give it to you for free. And the last time somebody contacted me about this was yesterday, to ask about a record that is 23 years old. And so that's what I wanted to say, the power of things like music to connect people, even people you don't even know, people that you'll never talk to, and it moves them in some way. So here's what I learned from this. Design can take any form. I think I learned through this experience that when I was a kid, I thought design was just a visual thing. But I realized that what I was doing was designing sound. And sound design is an actual career, and that maybe I could think about design from a wider lens. This was something I did I started this when I was a teenager. And I think that it changed the way that I thought about design and it was instrumental in becoming the way that I design things now. Sometimes the way to find yourself is to get lost somewhere you've never been. Music was somewhere I'd never been, and I just wanted to be there. And for a little while, it was all I wanted to do. Also, don't worry about not knowing what you're doing. Just do it your own way. You'll find a way to do it, and don't worry about the rules about how you're supposed to do stuff. You'll find your own way to do things. And sometimes when you do it your own way, you invent entirely new ways of doing things. And connection between people can happen even without ever interacting, which is what I was talking about. So, I'm also part of a long-time part of an activist collective called the Yes Men. We do what's called identity correction. So we impersonate corporations or governments, and we either go really hard on them doing exactly the wrong thing, or we just say they're doing the right thing as them, and force them to actually go out to the media and say, no, we're not doing the right thing. That's not us, which gets them in trouble. So I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that we did. And we've, again, dozens and dozens of projects. I'm going to talk about 2 of them. So these are Cambodian garment factory workers. They reached out to an organization that advocates for garment factory workers who are being taken advantage of by corporations. This is Adidas' fancy new campus. Adidas was stiffing these garment factory workers for millions and millions of dollars. They were either not paying them at all or paying them almost nothing, and also building hundreds of millions of dollars worth of campuses and other things, and they can pay their workers, right? So we decided to be Adidas, and we were going to help these people out. We weren't going to pay them any money. What we were going to do was we were going to use them as inspiration for our fashion line, because who doesn't want that? So what we did was we went down to Cambodia and met with these garment factory workers, made sure that they were okay with us, because we don't want to speak for people if they don't want to be spoken for. And they were totally into it. So on the left, you have the actual workers. On the right, you have these silly fashions that we had some fashion designers come up with, ways to just make it look stupid. The real people and this nonsense over here. And what luck, Berlin Fashion Week was right around the corner, and it wasn't going to be too hard for us to just rent a warehouse, put out some flyers, say we were Adidas doing a hot new fashion show, and all the people at Fashion Week are looking for something to do. And so we advertised, we got people excited about it, and people were like, oh, what is this? This is exciting, a new Adidas fashion line. The place was packed with people who thought they were at an actual fashion show. And what we were doing was using this as a way to call out Adidas for its nonsense. And the people our team who was there, made sure that everybody understood that this was about wage theft, and that Adidas was going to do the right thing. They were going to maybe make some money off this fashion, and they can give it to these garment factory workers. They didn't. And this campaign is ongoing. We harass them every now and again with some new thing. We'll just show up and force them to say that that's not us, we're not doing this, we're not paying these people. And we can see I'm a big Adidas fan, so I'm very conflicted about this, and I haven't bought anything from Adidas since I was a part of this, because I think it's wrong, and I don't want to support it. So here's one. I don't know if anybody was at the Green Summit, but we talked about this last time. So Shell this time. Shell had this ridiculous ad campaign where they were talking about all this fantastical green stuff. They were going to save the world through green energy and all this other stuff that they weren't actually spending any money on. They were just using it to advertise themselves. Right. So this was their ad campaign. All nonsense. So while this campaign was going on, they were also trying to quietly go into the Arctic and prospect for oil. And so this is the rig that they were going to use for that. This is the port of Seattle. So what we did was we rented the Space Needle, and as Shell, we went and we had a big party, because you could see this thing right outside the window, and we were going to send it off with a whole new ad campaign. So we did this whole show, and like it was a big deal. And it was Let's Go Arctic, and we had an iceberg, and somebody made a mini rig that poured rum and Coke, and we had these big guys who wore these shirts that said "We're pumped" on them. One of my co-conspirators at the S-Men is gay, and he wanted to have a gay marching band. We couldn't figure out how to make that work, so we placated him by saying, we'll bring some muscle guys in and put them in muscle shirts, and they'll carry people around. And we also introduced some of our own ads with some fairly ridiculous copy. I won't read a whole thing, but it sort of is, how far can we push them to just make them look ridiculous in a way that seems like it's definitely them? Because remember, we are Shell in this case. And then finally, I think my favorite is the Titanic sinking, because why not? And then really the main thrust of this was not what we did. We made a website where anybody could submit their own ad copy, because as Shell, we wanted to be collaborative. We wanted everybody to have a chance to do some ad copy for Shell, because everybody loves Shell, right? Not really. This is what people came up with. At its peak, this website, the summer that it was up, got 4 million hits a month, and there were hundreds of thousands of these ads all over the place. I had people who I knew who were sending me text messages saying, have you seen this campaign? Shell screwed up real bad. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. We literally tanked this marketing campaign, and like if you Google image search the Shell Let's Go, everything on the front page is ours, not theirs. There are case studies written by marketing nerds on internet blogs about how the danger of people like us who are going to come and screw up your ad campaign. So you better be good at detecting us or something. I don't know. But by the time this rig finally got out of the port and they sent it up to the Arctic, everybody warned them not to do this, because they said drilling in the Arctic is very dangerous. There's going to be spills. There are going to be disasters. And sure enough, both their rig and their support ship beached themselves because they slipped their moorings from the boats that were towing them. And part of the reason why the media covered this was because, remember, Shell was trying to hide this. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't shut our campaign down because they were worried that if they talked about it, that it would bring attention to it. But, I mean, attention was there anyway. So their ships ran aground, and all the media covered it. And in the end, about a year later, we did this with Greenpeace, and one of the Greenpeace officers that we worked with called us and said they scrapped the whole thing. They decided they're not drilling in the Arctic, and part of the reason they did that was partially because of 5 or 6 people who just wanted to make jokes about them and make them look stupid. So I think that I want to say, it doesn't matter how few people you are, you can totally screw things up for a corporation. And by the way, they haven't ever decided to go back. They're still not going. But they were going to make billions of dollars off this, they thought, and we screwed it up. And so I'm very proud of that. Proud of us. So part of the thing about the Yes Men is we're all serious and somewhat depressed people about the way things are going, and the only thing we have is stupid humor, right? And so I want to say that the challenges you face are serious, and if you're going into leadership and you want to do big things, you're going to face serious challenges, and they're also going to be frustrating. You need to find joy in the fight. And fighting dire fights can also be fun, so don't forget to have fun with things, even if it's the worst situation ever. Find some way to find fun in it. because you burn yourself out otherwise. You don't need to be a lot of people to have a big impact. Break rules strategically. There are rules that are wrong. People talk about like following the law and stuff, like how many laws are wrong? I mean, slavery was legal in the United States. Might be again, who knows? Don't fear the powerful because they fear you. And if you're not afraid of them, then they fear you more. So, like I said, the projects are all over the place. So some projects are just personal. So this is, we spent the beginning of the pandemic up at my brother's house, which is up in the Catskills where we live now. And always lived in cities before, and just fell in love with the area and decided that we were gonna build a house, which honestly, if you had asked me 2 months before we started, I would never have said we're gonna build a house. It was one of those things that just happened. And so, we built a house. And so that's our house. And we learned a lot of things. I say we because my wife and I did a whole lot of work on this place. We learned stonework and how to build stone walls, which is a big thing in New England and upstate New York. We tiled a floor. We tiled a lot of stuff. Lauren did all this. She painted cabinets. I didn't do that part. So, I built shelves. I built more shelves. I'm still building shelves. I'll be building shelves until I die. All so that we could have this place where the outside world and the inside world just blend together, and you can watch the seasons change. Really, we built it for these cats so they can sun themselves. It's the real genius is here behind this whole thing. And so, what I learned from this. Learn new skills with no professional application. Sometimes you get so focused on the thing that you're doing that you forget to just do things for yourself. Acquire lots of power tools if you can, because you'll use them for something. And power tools are cool, so, you know. Make things just because they're beautiful. And do projects just for you and your cats. If you don't have cats, get some cats, so you can do projects for them. So, what I really want to say is, all this is, do what you love. And if what you love changes, change what you do. If you find yourself like kind of burned out in a thing that you thought was going to be like your big thing, you know, just think about like, is there something else you love more? Maybe change what you do. Even if you think what you love seems crazy. Also, even if your parents think what you love seems crazy, which mine certainly have. They don't anymore. They're powerless. So, those are my projects. This isn't really about projects, by the way. So these might seem like they're completely all over the place, but to me, there's exquisite discipline. They all adhere to the principle of organizing information in space. Every single one of them is actually based on a very strict, unusually rigid set of principle foundations that I have. And the reason I'm so rigid will become apparent shortly. I've just been privileged to do a lot of outlandish stuff in my life, and I'm grateful that I have that freedom. And I think everybody should do their best to just do crazy things and experiment and do things that aren't the same. Try new things. You might wind up with a career you never expected. So this talk isn't really about my work. It kind of is. The thing I've understood the least in my life, and the thing I want to understand the most is me. So now I want to take you back to Montessori school and being a kid again, and look at the story from a different angle. And I know I'm talking about myself a whole lot, and it feels a little self-absorbed, but that'll make sense at some point later in this talk. But remember, I learned through experience. So any useful inspiration I might have to share with you is going to be through my own experience. And that's how I'll explain why I'm talking about what I'm talking about, and that's how I will prove it's worth listening to. So, all right, where was I? So let's go back to my childhood. And I want to tell you a story that you can't see. So life seemed okay in Montessori school. And that's where when I could just follow my heart, I tend to excel, as the projects I shared suggest. That's the freedom Montessori gave me formally, and I'm grateful for it. Then I got to spend my spare time alone daydreaming, which felt like heaven to me, and it's still one of my favorite pastimes. I do it every day, all the time. I do it in the middle of conversations. Sometimes I'm talking to my wife, and she'll realize that at some point I just checked out on the conversation. She'll be like, "You're not listening to me, are you?" As I started to grow, though, I left Montessori for learning systems marked by memorization and one-direction information, led by teachers who didn't really take well to kids playing in class or daydreaming or drawing on their desks or sleeping through class, which I did a lot. So trouble started showing itself. I got in trouble a lot. I couldn't follow directions. I didn't really have interest in what teachers were teaching. My parents took me to a hospital, and they stuck suction cups to my head when I was 6 years old or so, and had me say nonsense words in my head so that they could test to see if I had epilepsy, because they also noticed when I was a kid that I would just zone out in the middle of conversations. So it also started to become clear that I struggled with people. I didn't really understand friendship or relationships conceptually. I started coping with communication difficulties by observing other kids and mimicking them, which is weird. Every person or group dynamic was different, so I was any range of people depending on who I was with all the time. I would change depending on who I was with. Friends I did make often wouldn't stay that way. They would recognize my parroting, and I recognize now that parroting other people can feel a little like the uncanny valley. People would often, at some point, abruptly abandon the friendship for reasons they wouldn't explain to me. I was often made fun of, but I didn't know why. I had my own world, and that world felt safer to me, so that's where I lived most of the time. This all got progressively worse as I became a teenager. I was frequently depressed for reasons I didn't understand at the time. Everything seemed alien and difficult to me, and I didn't understand commonly accepted concepts of time and its passage, seconds, minutes, hours, days, years. And the duration of each of these time measurements is the same for me. I feel like I live in, there is no time. And that's still the way I feel about things. So sometimes I can be functionally absent from reality for long periods of time and not be aware of it. And when I return, I can be confused about changes that happened sometimes years ago because people have moved on, and I was unable to recognize that I wasn't sort of in the same world with them. By my mid-teens, I was in weekly therapy and medication, neither of which really seemed to be all that helpful. I also didn't really understand sleep, so I just basically tried to never sleep, which is going to be a problem in a few seconds here. My parents did what they could, but they didn't understand it either. My mom, who saved me as a kid through Montessori, did her best to be there. My dad did too in his own way, but now I know he struggled to connect with people in the same way I do, which is going to make sense in a minute. When I was 19, I was institutionalized. I was in art school, and for some reason I decided not to move down to New York City for it. So I would commute 5 hours a day back and forth from school, get home, and do these 200-hour homework projects. And so basically for months, I just didn't sleep, because you don't understand why would you need to sleep when you can just stay up and do stuff. Eventually, I basically started hallucinating, and I told my parents about what was happening, and they took me to the hospital. I got diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is incorrect. But I learned the dangers of never sleeping, so sleep, you should sleep. So this was all kind of a mess. And if I was ever going to have a life that I could be happy about, I needed to figure out what was happening to me. And all the while, I was starting to plow into this life of projects, and like I said, that just happens on its own. And I feel like the projects seem to choose me, and I feel helpless to resist, and it's always been that way, it still is. And every time I wind up doing some crazy project, my wife is like, I'm not going to be able to stop you. So it's like I'm possessed by this need to create things, regardless of how it affects my life or the lives of people I love. By my mid-20s, I was starting to have some better self-awareness, but that self-awareness just looked like paranoia because I would never know when I was going to have a disastrous interaction or do something that unintentionally drew negative attention. So remember, the way that I fit in was by creating a character I thought people could accept. And that's exhausting. And slipping freaked people out because I would suddenly become a different person and they were just like, who are you? And when I knew that I'd slipped, it just got weirder because the facade was compromised and I knew that I was maybe not the person they thought I was, which I think was a lot of times the reason why people just disappeared. So I developed a lot of anxiety. And as an adult, I experienced the world of people in the same way I did when I was a kid, feeling like I was there, but not at the same time. Standing right next to everyone, separated by a glass wall that rendered me unable to be a part of the world I could see and desperately wanted to be a part of. Just a normal person. I discovered early on that I couldn't keep a full-time job to save my life. I tried a few times. It was a disaster. My coworkers were often openly hostile towards me, until I would be terminated, got the message, it would be nice if I left, or I simply lost interest and moved on. The full-time job I have now is my first full-time job in almost 30 years, and I'm proud of that. My boss seems to understand me and have patience for me, and I appreciate him more than he'll ever know for that, and I don't know if he's going to ever have time to listen to this. Maybe he'll never hear me say that to him. So each lost work or personal relationship left me feeling increasingly isolated. I would wager a guess 95% of the relationships ended due to a misunderstanding, and I'm an expert at misunderstandings bad enough for people to never want to talk to me again. Each new relationship, even now, feels like an increasing risk because each lost relationship is proof I won't be able to have close relationships, so I cling desperately to people. Even when I know they're gone, people misunderstand the reason for that too. So by 40, I had been diagnosed with half of the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, if you're not familiar. It's a thick book that catalogs all the crazy stuff your brain can get into. So I've had depression, schizophrenia, ADHD, sleep disorders, dissociative disorder, and more. I don't have any of these things. But psychologists, like to diagnose stuff and give people drugs. So there was a desperation to this as the years and decades passed because I just wanted whatever I was experiencing to go away so I could have a normal life. And I wanted to figure out what it was I was experiencing so that I could finally resolve it and move on. As I lived, I had this detective that I committed to studying me when I left the hospital when I was 19, to figure out what was going on, and that stayed focused. It's still there, it's still doing its work. As I struggled to keep myself together, it was busy cataloging everything, looking for patterns that could help, and feeding them back to me in productive ways. This more than 2-decade period that started when I was 19 and stretched into my early 40s was a fascinating lesson in the sophisticated automatic processes your brain manages without your conscious knowledge. But I saw them. It was me who gave the orders to do that search. So I was aware that I had asked for this part of my brain to do this. So to some degree, I understood what it was doing, even when it wouldn't give me a schedule for when it would produce or deploy its findings into my unconscious. They would just show up like an app update, and suddenly I had new functionality. So by my early 40s, I started to be able to give people kind of a primer on how to deal with me. New people came along who did want to deal with me, at least at first. I still hadn't gotten the hang of holding on to relationships, and I still haven't. I was lucky to be talented enough that people wanted to work with me or talk to me, or at least at first. So though maybe it was a little awkward, as a standard practice, I began starting relationships by explaining the part of me I didn't entirely understand, but I could describe, evidence of its presence, and offer guidance on how to interpret my behaviors that I couldn't consciously see before they happened. And that helped. It still does. I'm getting better at it. So while the project part of me was busy churning out all these projects that I was doing, and there was this other part of me struggling to manage itself and unable to connect with people, still alone even when there were people all around me. And a third, the detective searching for a unified theory to explain my existence. So one day I was at my brother's house and he made an offhand joke about having Asperger's. And I don't remember the context, but my detective perked up and said, Asperger's, okay, Asperger's, that's autism, okay. But I was a pretty emotional person. I wasn't nonverbal. Though I couldn't seem to manage a full-time job, I worked, and I was pretty successful. My understanding of autism was formed in the dark ages of the 80s, when the standard practice with kids diagnosed with autism was to put them in what amounted to permanent daycare for life and not teach them anything. And for this is why I'm so glad my mom was a Montessori teacher, because had I wound up in public schools, I might have been diagnosed earlier, and I might not even be here. So that wasn't me. So I followed a way as interesting, but didn't pursue it, but it kept tugging at me over the years. 2 years later, the pandemic happened and shut everything down. And for the first time since I was hospitalized at 19, I had the space to just focus on myself. I had no work to do, no projects to do. There was nothing to do because everything was shut down, nobody was doing anything. So it was just me and my brain, and endless hours to overanalyze myself. My detective took the opportunity to give it a push. Why not autism? So I took advantage of the silence to consider that possibility seriously. And everything suddenly made sense. I started thinking about all these experiences in my life, and I would Google the crap out of this stuff, and I just would see okay, this actually makes sense. I've been searching for 30 years to find something, and I thought maybe that was it. And that maybe that was my unified model. So I decided to take an autism test, and my wife and I agreed to this. So autism tests aren't like going to a psychologist and just getting diagnosed with something. They're rigorous. I don't know if anybody here is autistic, but it's weeks and weeks of tests, all kinds of weird tests that they make you do. And so when they do come up with a diagnosis, oftentimes people don't get diagnosed with autism because the tests are pretty strict. And so waiting for that was pretty stressful, because what if it was wrong? And then just yet another diagnosis that wasn't something. But it wasn't. It was what it was. And that changed my life. When I got the diagnosis, it was just sending me an email, and I was just like, okay, well, what now? It was and over the ensuing few years, I've reviewed my entire life. And when I spoke at the Green Summit, I was just at the very beginning of that process, and I didn't know what I know now. And I spent just all this time trying to make sense of it, and all of it suddenly it was understandable in a way that it never had been. So you see, all these projects I've learned so much from, and that I've loved so much, that was me being autistic and not knowing it. And all that time, this thing I was trying to eliminate was there and just giving me everything it had. And just guiding me down all these wonderful paths that I went on, that I loved being on, and I still love being on. And without it, I never would have done any of it. I've been an artist, been a musician, started a whole company, had the audacity to think our yes men stunts could work, or designed a house. I didn't know how to do any of those things. This thing, I think, is incorrectly characterized as a disorder. It's called autism spectrum disorder, and I think disorder is really an unfair term for it. It was there the whole time just saying, it's okay, I'll show you how to do these things. So I'm a little behind on my slides here, sorry, this is who I am really. So what am I learning? To invite all of me to participate in my life, including the parts that are difficult. My most difficult parts are the source of my greatest growth and my proudest achievements. I shouldn't be scared to just be myself. Practice forgiveness for me and for people who've left, and they weren't bad people. I can be difficult to deal with. Don't give up. So this is what I actually came to tell you. I know I've been talking about myself, so I seem very self-centered. And actually, talking about yourself all the time is the thing that people don't like about autistic people, because they think that we're just selfish. Actually, the only thing, go back to this experience thing, it's just that I can't experience the world through someone else's experience. I can only do it through mine. And so that's why I talk about myself all the time, which people don't understand. So the whole point I want to share is actually this. These things that we struggle with, autism is mine. It could be something else for you. These things are also the source of our power. Engaging them, giving them space to participate fully in our lives, that's how we truly do the work we love. That's how we find in ourselves to do the things beyond anything we imagined. That's how we discover the work that makes us whole. And finding that work that makes you whole is how you change the world. Be it the world that we understand with its billions of people, or simply how you change the world for yourself. We all struggle with something. You might not know what it is yet, or it might just take the form of a nagging feeling you can't shake. It's there in everyone. That's just being human. That thing, or things, it's not always one, sometimes it's more than one thing, can be the source of our greatest strength. It can also be the source of our greatest weakness. It's how we engage with it that makes the difference. Do we give it space? Do we ask it what it needs from us to be a full participant in our lives? And relatedly, do we ask it how it wants to help? Or do we let it consume us and derail our lives? Because when you don't communicate with these things, they just need space, and they force their way into your life and they take over. So I invite everybody here to explore this, even if you think this is nonsense. You've got something, and I promise, when it receives your curiosity and your welcome, when you tell it, not only do I not want you to go away, but I need you, it'll transform your life. It's long, hard work, but you're young. You got time, and it's never too late. For me, it took 46 years. But finding myself is the most rewarding work I've ever done, and finally, finding my answer will forever be the greatest victory in my life, and the greatest gift I'll ever give myself. Now, my wife, who is sitting in the front row, I'm largely talking just to her. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at anyone else. It just makes me a little more comfortable. So she'll tell you it's clear I'll never stop struggling. She calls me a tornado because sometimes I can't find things, and I'm always late, and I'm just dropping things, and I leave the house 4 times and I have to come back and get stuff. I lose my wallet all the time. Every day I lose my wallet. She got me an AirTag for my wallet, and I left it in a parking lot the other night, and I drove away, and it worked. And so she works with me. She invents things for me, and sometimes things just show up in the house that she's testing out to see if I'll use them. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. But now I understand it's okay, and there's nothing wrong, and I'm learning to use this thing, and I'm just beginning to figure out how to use it consciously. And I'm learning through experience that I'm my biggest project. Now, how do you tap this struggle stuff to make it work, right? I was like trying to work out the outline for this, and somebody said, well, can you give a tutorial? What can people do? I mean, honestly, I'm not sure to answer that question. I think everybody needs to find their own path for this, because every person is unique, and the way that we all ingest information and understand things is different. But I can share a story about how I learned. I had a therapist about 20 years ago who taught me about something called the internal family systems model. Now, caveat before I get into it, this internal family stuff might not be your cup of tea, but I wanted to share what worked for me. Okay, so if anybody here is anybody here a psychologist? Well, I guess you're all in college, so maybe not yet, but I wanted to sort of give you, just explain what this is. So the short explanation is that the internal family systems model is basically a perspective shift. It's not what I would think of as something like multiple personality disorder, but I did get diagnosed with dissociative disorder, which is a part of multiple personality disorder, okay, which I don't have. Instead of thinking of everything happening in your head as originating from you, consider instead that you are full of individual people, each with their own motivations and objectives, thoughts, concerns, personalities, and even ages. Consider, for example, that extreme trauma lives on in you, and it never grows older than you were when it happened. All these parts are vying for engagement and acknowledgement and attention. And the conversations or arguments you facilitate as the person who's trying to get this, meat suit full of personalities to work together, the conversations you facilitate between them and the kindness you extend to each of them is how you grow, is how I grow. In that dialogue is how you create the space to ask yourself what you really want to do in the world. And my apologies on behalf of all of us old people, but my generation and the ones before us have unfortunately been really irresponsible, and we're leaving you with a lot of work to do. Sorry. And so it's essential for future leaders, including everybody in this room, to bring their whole selves to that work. You'll need to do astonishing things, and I know you can. And the work you want to do, you'll be tested to your limits, especially if you want to be in leadership. The parts of you that struggle and the things that they can teach you are where the strength to meet those tests come from. So I want to close by wrapping full circle to what I asked you at the very beginning of my talk, because now I hope, through sharing my own experiences with you, you have more context as to why I was asking these questions in the first place. So what do you struggle with? And what do you want to do in the world? Now imagine what you could do when you put them together.